Lisa Martinez stood at the viewing window of Kethra Prime Space Station and watched the ships come and go. Her heart felt heavy as she thought about her situation. The cargo freighter that brought her here had left 3 hours ago without her? Captain Johnson had fired the entire crew when his business deals went bad and he could not pay them. Now Lisa was stuck on this alien space station with only 50 credits in her pocket, and no way to get home to Earth. She had been working as a mechanic on cargo ships for 2 years since she finished school. The pay was not great, but it let her see different worlds and meet different people. She never thought she would end up alone and broke on a station full of strange aliens. Kethra Prime was huge and busy. Aliens from all over the galaxy came here to trade goods and do business. The station had 3 levels and thousands of shops, restaurants, and entertainment places. Lisa had never seen so many different types of aliens in one place. There were tall blue ones with 4 arms, small furry ones that looked like walking cats, and big rock-like creatures that moved very slowly. The air on the station smelled different from Earth air. It had a metallic taste that made her nose wrinkle. The gravity was also lighter than Earth gravity, which made her feel like she was floating when she walked. Everything felt strange and foreign to her. Lisa walked through the main corridor and looked at the job boards. Most of the work required special alien technology skills that she did not have. Some jobs were for species that could breathe underwater or survive in extreme heat. There was nothing for a human girl from the poor side of New Detroit. As she walked, she heard loud cheering and shouting coming from a large building ahead. A big sign in many alien languages said Combat Dome and showed pictures of different creatures fighting. Lisa had heard about places like this from other cargo ship workers. They were like the old gladiator arenas from Earth history, but with aliens from different worlds. She went inside to see what was happening. The building was dark except for bright lights over a large circular fighting area in the center. Hundreds of aliens sat in seats around the arena, shouting and making bets on the fighters. 2 large creatures were fighting in the ring. One looked like a giant spider and the other was covered in metal plates like armor. Lisa found an empty seat and watched the fight. The spider creature was fast and kept jumping around, but the armored one was stronger. After 10 minutes of fighting, the armored creature grabbed the spider and threw it against the wall. The crowd went wild as the spider creature lay still on the ground. A slimy green alien with too many eyes walked up to the microphone and announced the winner. Then he said that anyone who wanted to fight could sign up at the desk near the entrance. The prize money for winning a fight was 500 credits. Lisa's eyes went wide when she heard this number. 500 credits would be enough to buy passage on a ship back to Earth. She made her way down to the desk where a different alien sat looking bored. This one had gray skin and tentacles instead of hair. He looked up at Lisa with 4 yellow eyes and made a sound like laughing. "What do you want, little human?" he asked in broken English. "I want to sign up to fight," Lisa said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. The alien looked at her small frame and laughed again. "You? Fight? Humans are weak. You will die in first minute. I can fight," Lisa said. "I need the money." The alien, whose name tag said Vex, looked at her again. Lisa was 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed about 120 pounds. She had brown hair that she kept in a ponytail and green eyes. She did not look like much of a fighter compared to the huge aliens she had seen in the ring, but Vex was thinking about something else. The crowd always liked to see new fighters, especially ones that were different or unusual. A human girl would definitely be unusual. Even if she lost quickly, the crowd would be entertained by watching her try to fight much bigger and stronger opponents. "You pay entry fee of 20 credits, Vex said. "If you win, you get 500. If you lose, you get nothing, and maybe you get hurt very bad." Lisa counted her money. She would have only 30 credits left if she paid the entry fee. But if she won just one fight, she could afford to leave this station. If she did nothing, she would be stuck here until her money ran out, and then she would probably starve. "I'll do it," she said, and put 20 credits on the desk. Vex took the money and typed something into his computer. "Your first fight is tomorrow night. You fight against Crex the Bone Crusher. He is Ceridian warrior, very strong, very mean. He has won 15 fights and never lost. Lisa felt her stomach drop when she heard this. She had hoped to fight someone smaller for her first match. But she had already paid the money and there was no going back now. What kind of weapons can I use? She asked. No weapons, Vex said with an evil smile. Only your body. Ceridians have claws and teeth and thick skin. Humans have nothing. This will be very entertaining for crowd. Lisa left the combat dome feeling scared but determined. She went back to the cheap hotel room she had rented and sat on the narrow bed. She thought about her brother Carlos, who had taught her how to fight when they were kids growing up in the rough neighborhoods of New Detroit. Carlos was 4 years older than Lisa and had joined the Earth Defense Force when she was 16. Before he left, he had spent months teaching her how to defend herself. He showed her boxing moves, kicks, and dirty fighting tricks that could help a smaller person beat a bigger opponent. Size and strength don't matter if you're smart about it, Carlos had told her. Most big guys expect you to fight them the same way they fight. When you do something different, it confuses them and gives you an advantage. Lisa spent the rest of the day walking around the station and observing the Ceridian aliens she saw. They were tall and covered in scales like Earth reptiles. They had long arms with sharp claws and powerful legs. Their heads were shaped like lizards with rows of sharp teeth, but Lisa also noticed things that might help her. The Ceridians moved more slowly than humans. Their thick scales might protect them from cuts, but they also made them less flexible. And like most big creatures, they seemed to rely on their size and strength instead of speed and cleverness. That night, Lisa lay in her bed and remembered everything Carlos had taught her about fighting. Tomorrow she would face an opponent who was bigger, stronger, and had natural weapons. But she had something that Crex the Bone Crusher did not have. She had the ability to think and adapt and use her opponent's expectations against him. The next evening would determine whether she lived or died, whether she escaped this station or became just another victim in the combat dome. Lisa closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her mind kept planning for the fight that would change everything. The next evening came too quickly for Lisa. She stood in the small waiting room behind the combat dome arena and listened to the crowd getting louder and more excited. Through the thin walls, she could hear the announcer talking about the upcoming fight in several alien languages. Her hands were shaking and her mouth felt dry. She had not eaten much all day because her stomach was too nervous to keep food down. The reality of what she was about to do hit her like a cold wave. In a few minutes, she would be fighting for her life against a creature that could probably kill her with one swipe of his claws. The door opened and Vex came in with his slimy smile. Time to go, little human. The crowd is very excited to see you fight. Many bets have been placed. The odds are 50-1 against you winning. Lisa followed Vex through a dark tunnel that led to the arena. As they walked, he kept talking about how much money the fight promoters would make from ticket sales and betting. He seemed very happy about the whole situation. Crex is a very popular fighter, Vex said as they reached the entrance to the arena. He likes to break bones of his opponents. Sometimes he keeps teeth as trophies, but don't worry, we have good medical team. They will fix you up after fight, if there is enough left to fix. The tunnel opened into the bright lights of the arena, and Lisa stepped into the ring. The noise from the crowd was incredible. Hundreds of alien voices were shouting, laughing, and making strange sounds she had never heard before. She looked up at the seats and saw creatures of all shapes and sizes pointing at her and talking to each other. Most of them seemed to think her appearance in the ring was very funny. She could hear laughter even though she did not understand the words they were saying. Some aliens were holding up betting slips and shaking their heads like they could not believe anyone would bet on the small human girl. Then the crowd noise changed to something more like excitement and fear. Lisa turned around and saw her opponent entering the ring from the other side. Crex the Bone Crusher was even bigger than she had expected. He stood over 7 feet tall and his whole body was covered in dark green scales that looked as hard as armor. His arms were thick and muscular with hands that ended in curved claws about 3 inches long. His legs were like tree trunks and when he walked, Lisa could feel the vibrations in the floor. His head was long and narrow like a crocodile with yellow eyes and rows of sharp white teeth. Krex walked slowly around the edge of the ring. Showing off for the crowd, he raised his arms above his head and let out a roar that made Lisa's ears hurt. The crowd roared back at him, and many aliens stamped their feet or made their own threatening sounds. When Krex saw Lisa standing in the center of the ring, he started laughing. It was a deep, rumbling sound that came from his chest. He said something in his own language that made many aliens in the crowd laugh too. Then he switched to broken English so Lisa could understand him. "Little pink thing thinks she can fight, Krex?" He laughed again and slapped his chest with both hands. "Krex has killed bigger things than you for breakfast. You should run home to your mama before Krex breaks your tiny bones." The crowd loved this and erupted in more laughter and cheering. Lisa felt her face turn red with embarrassment and anger, but she tried not to let it show. Getting angry would only make her lose focus, and focus was the only advantage she had. The announcer's voice boomed over the loudspeakers as he introduced both fighters. When he announced Lisa's name and said she was from Earth, the crowd laughed so hard that some aliens fell out of their seats. When he announced Krex and listed all his victories, the crowd cheered like he had already won. A referee, which was some kind of floating robot, moved to the center of the ring. It explained the rules in multiple languages. No weapons were allowed, except natural body parts. The fight would continue until one fighter could not continue or gave up. There would be no rounds or time limits. Lisa took a deep breath and tried to remember everything Carlos had taught her. She bent her knees slightly and raised her hands, but not in any fighting pose that the aliens would recognize. To them, she looked awkward and unprepared, like someone who had never been in a real fight before. This was exactly what she wanted. Carlos had taught her that looking weak and inexperienced often made opponents careless and overconfident. If Krex thought she was helpless, he might not take her seriously until it was too late. Krex circled around her slowly, taking his time like a cat playing with a mouse. He was clearly enjoying the moment and wanted to make the fight last long enough to entertain the crowd. Every few steps he would make fake attacks just to watch Lisa flinch and jump back. "Is little human scared?" Krex asked in his deep voice. "Krex can make death quick if you ask nicely. Or Krex can make it slow and painful. Crowd likes slow and painful better." Lisa did not answer. She kept moving and watching, trying to learn everything she could about how Krex fought. She noticed that he was strong and intimidating, but he was also slower than she was. His thick scales and heavy muscles made him less flexible than a human. She also saw that he was showing off for the crowd instead of focusing completely on the fight. This was good news for her. An opponent who was thinking about entertainment. Instead of combat was an opponent who might make mistakes. The crowd was getting impatient for real action. They started chanting something that sounded like they wanted Krex to stop playing around and finish the fight. Lisa could feel the bloodthirsty mood in the arena and knew that these aliens had come to see violence and death. Krex heard the crowd too and decided it was time to end his game. He stopped circling and faced Lisa directly. His yellow eyes narrowed and his lips pulled back to show all his sharp teeth. The playful mood was gone, and now he looked like the dangerous predator he really was. "Time to die, little human," he sighed and raised both arms above his head. This was the moment Lisa had been waiting for. When Carlos taught her to fight, he always said that big opponents liked to use overhead attacks because they could put all their weight and strength behind them. But overhead attacks also left the attacker open and vulnerable if the smaller opponent was quick enough to avoid them. Krex brought his clawed hands down toward Lisa's head with tremendous force. If the attack had connected, it would have split her skull open like a melon. But Lisa was already moving before his arms started to come down. She ducked low and stepped to her right, using her smaller size and better speed to slip inside Krex's reach. The crowd gasped as they realized the little human was not where she was supposed to be. Instead of standing still and getting killed, she had moved to a position where Krex could not hit her, but Lisa was not done moving. As Krex's claws whistled through the empty air where her head had been, she planted her feet and twisted her whole body upward. Carlos had taught her that real fighting power came not from arm strength, but from using the whole body like a spring. Lisa put every ounce of strength she had into an uppercut aimed at the spot where Crex's jaw connected to his skull. It was a target Carlos had shown her on diagrams of different alien species. Even the toughest creatures had vulnerable points if you knew where to look for them. Her fist connected with Crex's jaw just as he realized she was no longer in front of him. The sound of breaking bone echoed through the suddenly quiet arena. Like a gunshot. Crex's eyes rolled back in his head and his massive body crashed to the floor with a thud that shook the entire ring. The silence lasted for about 3 seconds before the crowd exploded into chaos. Aliens were jumping out of their seats, throwing things, and making sounds Lisa had never heard before. The betting computers were flashing red lights. As they tried to calculate payouts for the impossible upset, Lisa stood over Crex's unconscious form, breathing hard but victorious. She had done something that no one in the arena thought was possible. The weak little human girl had defeated one of the most feared fighters in the combat dome with a single punch. Lisa looked down at Crex's motionless body and could hardly believe what had just happened. The massive Ceridian warrior who had seemed so dangerous and unstoppable was now lying unconscious at her feet, with his jaw hanging at an unnatural angle. Dark green blood was dripping from his mouth onto the arena floor. The crowd's reaction was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Some aliens were screaming in shock and disbelief. Others were throwing their betting slips in the air and shouting what sounded like curses in their native languages. A few were standing on their seats and pointing at Lisa like she was some kind of miracle or monster. The floating referee robot moved over Crex's body and scanned him with a red light. After a few seconds, it announced in multiple languages that Crex was alive but unconscious, and that Lisa Martinez from Earth was the winner of the fight. The announcement caused another wave of chaos in the crowd. Lisa raised her hands above her head like she had seen fighters do in movies, but she was not really celebrating. She was mostly just relieved to be alive and amazed that her plan had actually worked. The punch she had thrown was something Carlos had taught her years ago, but she had never used it in a real fight before tonight. Medical robots rolled into the ring and began working on Crex. They lifted his heavy body onto a stretcher and carried him away to whatever medical facility the combat dome had for injured fighters. Lisa watched them go and felt a small stab of guilt. She had not wanted to hurt him permanently, just win the fight so she could get off this station. Vex came running into the ring with his tentacles waving wildly. His 4 yellow eyes were wide with shock, and he kept looking back and forth between Lisa and the spot where Crex had fallen. When he reached her, he grabbed her arm with one of his slimy hands. "How did you do that?" he demanded in his broken English. "Humans are weak." "Everyone knows humans are weak. Crex is champion fighter. He has never lost before." Lisa pulled her arm free from his grip. "I got lucky," she said, not wanting to explain her real strategy. The less these aliens knew about human fighting techniques, the better it would be for her if she had to fight again. But Vex was not satisfied with that answer. He started talking rapidly into a communication device, probably telling other fight promoters what had happened. Lisa could hear excitement in his voice, even though she could not understand the words he was using. The crowd was starting to calm down, but Lisa could feel hundreds of alien eyes staring at her as she left the ring. She heard her name being mentioned in conversations all around the arena. Some aliens were arguing about whether the fight had been fair or if Lisa had used some kind of trick or hidden weapon. Back in the waiting room, Lisa sat on a metal bench and tried to process what had just happened. Her hands were still shaking, but now it was from adrenaline instead of fear. She had actually done it. She had won her first fight in the combat dome and earned the 500 credits she needed to buy passage off Kethra Prime. A few minutes later, Vex came into the room carrying a bag of credits. He counted out 500 and handed them to Lisa, but his expression showed that he was already thinking about something else. "Many people are talking about your fight," he said. "They want to know more about human fighting. Some are saying it was accident, but I think maybe humans are not as weak as everyone believes." Lisa took the money and put it in her pocket. "Maybe not," she said carefully. "I have proposal for you," Vex continued. Stay and fight more matches. I can arrange fights with different opponents. Good money for you, good entertainment for crowd, everyone wins. Lisa had been planning to take the first ship back to Earth, but now she hesitated. 500 credits would get her home, but it would not give her much of a life once she got there. She had no job waiting for her and very few skills that would help her find good work. How much money? She asked. Vex's eyes lit up when he realized she was interested. Next fight, 1,000 credits if you win. After that, we see how popular you become. Famous fighters can make very good living here. 1,000 credits was more money than Lisa had ever had at one time. It was enough to rent a decent apartment on Earth for several months while she figured out what to do with her life. But it also meant fighting another opponent who would probably be even more dangerous than Krex. Who would I fight? She asked. There are many possibilities, Vex said. Word of your victory is spreading fast. Other fighters want to prove that. Beating Krex was just luck. They think Human Girl cannot do it twice, Lisa thought about this. If other fighters underestimated her the same way Krex had, she might have a real advantage. Her victory tonight had been due to careful planning and technique, not luck. If she could keep using surprise and intelligence against opponents who expected her to be weak, she might be able to win more fights. I need time to think about it. She said. Of course, Vex agreed, but don't take too long. Many promoters will want to make deals with you now. Better to work with me since I gave you first chance? Lisa left the combat dome and walked through the corridors of HFY Prime. Everything looked different to her now. A few hours ago, she had been a desperate human girl with no money and no options. Now, she was something else entirely, a fighter who had shocked the galaxy. By defeating a champion that everyone thought was unbeatable. As she walked, she noticed that other beings were looking at her differently too. Word of her victory was spreading through the station faster than she had expected. Some aliens pointed at her and whispered to their companions. Others stared openly as she passed by. In a cantina near her hotel, she heard two Tellurians arguing about her fight. One insisted that she had cheated somehow, while the other claimed that humans might be more dangerous than anyone realized. Lisa bought a drink and listened to their conversation without letting them know she understood their language. The debate was happening all over the station. Some aliens refused to believe that a human could defeat a Ceridian in fair combat. Others were starting to question everything they thought they knew about Earth and its people. A few were even suggesting that humans might have been hiding their true abilities for reasons of their own. Lisa finished her drink and went back to her hotel room. She lay on the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling while she thought about her options. She could take her winnings and go home to Earth, where she would probably end up working in some factory or service job for the rest of her life, or she could stay on HFY Prime and see how far she could take this new career as a fighter. It was dangerous, but it was also the first time in her life that she had felt truly good at something important. Tonight she had proven that humans could compete with any species in the galaxy, if they were smart about it. She thought about Carlos and wondered what he would tell her to do. He had always said that opportunities like this did not come along very often, and that sometimes you had to take risks to make something meaningful out of your life. Lisa made her decision. Tomorrow she would tell Vex that she wanted to fight. Again, she would keep using the techniques Carlos had taught her and see how many more opponents she could surprise. Maybe she would lose eventually, but tonight had shown her that humans had advantages that other species did not understand or expect. She closed her eyes and started planning her next fight. Somewhere in the galaxy there was another alien warrior who thought humans were weak and easy to defeat. Lisa was looking forward to proving them wrong. 3 weeks after her victory over Krex, Lisa's life had changed completely. The video recording of her fight had spread across the galactic information networks faster than anyone expected. Beings on hundreds of worlds had watched the small human girl shatter the jaw of the supposedly unbeatable Ceridian warrior. Lisa had fought 4 more matches since then and won them all. Each victory had brought her more fame and more money than she had ever dreamed of having. Her hotel room was now filled with gifts from fans, interview requests from news organizations, and fight contracts from promoters across the sector. Her second opponent had been a crystalline warrior named Shex, whose body was made of living mineral that could deflect most physical attacks. Everyone expected Lisa to lose badly because her punches should have been useless against his rock-hard exterior, but Lisa had spent days studying crystalline anatomy and discovered something interesting about how their bodies worked. The mineral plates that protected them were held together by resonant frequencies, like a complex musical instrument made of stone. During the fight, Lisa had used a technique that Carlos never taught her but that she figured out herself. Instead of trying to break through Shex's armor with brute force, she hit him at specific points while humming at a precise pitch. The vibrations disrupted the resonant frequency that held his body together, causing cracks to appear in his mineral shell. When Shex tried to repair the damage by shifting his internal structure, Lisa struck again at a different frequency. Within minutes, his protective armor was so weakened that her normal punches could hurt him. He surrendered before she could cause permanent damage to his crystal matrix. The crowd had been amazed by this victory, but not as shocked as they were by her. Third fight. Her opponent that time was a gaseous being called Vrix who could change from solid to vapor form at will. Most fighters had no way to hurt something that could become like air. Whenever they tried to attack it, Lisa had solved this problem by studying atmospheric pressure and gas behavior. She realized that even in vapor form, Vrix still had to maintain some kind of molecular cohesion to think and move. During the fight, she used rapid movements and precise breathing techniques to create pressure changes in the air around him. When Vrix tried to become gaseous to avoid her attacks, Lisa would suddenly compress the air in a small area, forcing his molecules closer together than he could control. This caused him intense pain and confusion, making it impossible for him to maintain his vapor form effectively. Her fourth opponent was even stranger, a hive mind fighter that was actually 3 separate bodies controlled by one shared consciousness. Most fighters found this overwhelming because they had to deal with multiple attackers, who could coordinate perfectly with each other. But Lisa had grown up in a rough neighborhood where gang fights were common, and she understood group psychology better than most people. She realized that the hive mind's greatest strength was also a potential weakness. If she could disrupt their mental connection, they would become confused and disorganized. During the fight, Lisa used psychological warfare techniques that Carlos had learned in the military. She would attack one body while shouting insults and threats at another, creating conflicting mental signals that the shared consciousness had trouble processing. When the hive mind tried to respond to multiple stimuli at once, their coordination broke down and they began making mistakes. Lisa won that fight by essentially giving the hive mind a mental headache so severe that they could not function as a unit anymore. They surrendered when their shared consciousness became too fragmented to continue fighting effectively. Her most recent victory had been against a phase walker named Zeth who could shift between different dimensional planes to avoid attacks. He could become partially invisible and untouchable, making him nearly impossible to hit with conventional fighting methods. Lisa had beaten him by using predictive mathematics and pattern recognition. She spent hours before the fight studying recordings of phase walkers in combat, learning to recognize the subtle signs that indicated when they were about to shift between dimensions. During the actual fight, Lisa did not try to hit where Zeth was, but where she calculated he would be when he returned to normal space. By the time he realized that she could predict his movements, it was too late for him to change his strategy. She caught him with a devastating combination just as he materialized from a dimensional shift. Each of these victories had made Lisa more famous and more respected throughout the sector. Aliens who had never heard of Earth were now asking questions about human capabilities and fighting techniques. Some species that had considered humans to be primitive were starting to reassess their opinions. The money was good too. Lisa now had over 10,000 credits saved up, more than enough to live comfortably for years. But money was not the only reason she kept fighting. She had discovered that she enjoyed the challenge of facing opponents who seemed impossible to defeat, and finding ways to beat them anyway. More importantly, she was changing how the galaxy saw humanity. Before her fights, most aliens thought of humans as weak, soft creatures who relied on technology because they had no natural advantages. Now they were beginning to understand that humans had something perhaps more valuable than claws or armor, or natural weapons. The ability to adapt and learn and find creative solutions to any problem. Lisa received a message on her communication device that made her pause and think seriously about her future. It was from General Patricia Hayes of the Earth Defense Force, asking if Lisa would be interested in helping to train military personnel in alien combat techniques. The message explained that Earth's military leaders had been watching her fights with great interest. They realized that Lisa had developed methods for defeating alien opponents that could be extremely valuable for human soldiers, who might face similar enemies in the future, but Lisa had already decided on a different path. That morning, she had signed papers to establish the first human-owned business on Kethera Prime, a combat training academy that would teach fighting techniques to anyone willing to learn. Regardless of their species, the idea had come to her. After she started receiving requests from young aliens who wanted to learn how she defeated opponents that were supposedly superior to her. They were fascinated by the concept of using intelligence and adaptability instead of relying only on natural physical advantages. Lisa's academy would teach what she called adaptive combat dynamics, a fighting system based on studying opponents carefully, finding their weaknesses, and using unconventional methods to exploit those weaknesses. It was not just about fighting, but about learning to think differently about problems that seemed impossible to solve. Her first students were already signed up. They included a young Tellurian who was tired of being considered weak by other species, a crystalline who wanted to learn techniques that did not rely on his mineral armor, and even a Ceridian who had been inspired by watching Lisa defeat Krex. The academy would also serve another purpose. Lisa wanted to change the relationship between humans and other species from one of assumed inferiority to one of mutual respect and cooperation. By teaching aliens to fight like humans, she hoped to show them that Earth had valuable knowledge and skills to offer the galactic community. 3 days later, Lisa stood in the main training room of her new academy and watched her first class of students practice the basic techniques she had developed. Humans and aliens were working together, learning from each other, and discovering that cooperation was often more effective than competition. She thought about how far she had come from that desperate day when she was stranded on Kethera Prime, with 50 credits and no options. Now she was not just a successful fighter, but a teacher and businesswoman who was helping to reshape how different species understood each other. Her communication device buzzed with another message. This one was an invitation to compete in the Galactic Combat Championships on the capital world of the Interstellar Council. It was the most prestigious fighting tournament in known space, where the greatest warriors from every species came to prove their abilities. Lisa smiled as she read the invitation. A few months ago, the idea of a human being invited to such an event would have been impossible. Now it seemed like the natural next step in her journey. She looked around at her students and instructors, both human and alien, working together in her academy. Whatever happened at the championships, she had already accomplished something more important than winning fights. She had proven that humans deserved their place among the stars, not as servants or curiosities, but as equals who brought their own unique strengths to the galactic community. 6 months had passed since Lisa first stepped into the combat dome as a desperate young woman with no money and no options. Now she stood on the observation deck of her transport ship and watched the capital world of the Interstellar Council grow larger in the viewport. Tomorrow she would compete in the Galactic Combat Championships, representing not just herself but all of humanity. The invitation to the championships had been controversial. Many established fighters from traditional warrior species argued that humans had no place in such a prestigious tournament. They claimed that Lisa's victories were based on tricks and luck rather than real fighting skill. Some even suggested that she had used illegal technology or drugs to enhance her abilities, but the tournament organizers had reviewed recordings of all her fights and found no evidence of cheating. More importantly, they recognized that Lisa had accomplished something unprecedented. She had consistently defeated opponents who were supposed to be superior to her in every physical way. Whether other species liked it or not, she had earned her place at the championships through legitimate victories. Lisa's academy on Kethra Prime was now the most successful combat training facility in the sector. Students came from dozens of worlds to learn adaptive combat dynamics, the fighting system she had developed based on intelligence, adaptability, and creative problem-solving rather than brute force. The academy had graduated over 200 students in its first 6 months of operation. Many of them had gone on to successful fighting careers of their own, using the techniques Lisa taught them to defeat opponents who had previously seemed unbeatable. Others had returned to their homeworlds to establish their own training centers, spreading Lisa's methods throughout the galaxy, but the Academy's impact went far beyond combat training. The cooperation between human and alien instructors had created new forms of cultural exchange and understanding. Species that had been suspicious or dismissive of each other were now working together as equals. Learning that each had valuable knowledge to contribute, Lisa had also received offers from several major corporations who wanted to hire her as a consultant on human capabilities and potential. The galaxy's business community was beginning to realize that they had been underestimating an entire species, and they wanted to understand what other advantages humans might possess. The Earth Defense Force had increased its recruitment efforts after Lisa's fights became famous. Young humans who had never considered military service were now eager to prove that they could compete with any alien species. Applications to the Space Forces had increased by 300%, and Earth's government was finally being taken seriously in diplomatic negotiations with other worlds. As Lisa's ship approached the capital world, she thought about how much her life had changed. She was no longer the scared mechanic who had been abandoned on a space station with no money. She had become something she never expected to be, a symbol of human potential and a bridge between species that had never understood each other before. Her personal communication device buzzed with messages from supporters across the galaxy. Some were from her former students at the Academy, wishing her luck in the championships. Others were from humans on Earth who saw her as a hero representing their entire species. A few were even from alien fans who had become convinced that humans deserved more respect than they had previously received, but there were also messages from those who hoped she would fail. Several prominent alien fighters had publicly stated that they looked forward to putting the human back in her place. Some species representatives had complained to the tournament organizers that allowing a human to compete would diminish the prestige of the championships. Lisa tried not to let the negative messages bother her. She had learned to expect resistance from those who benefited from the old ideas about human weakness. Change was never easy, especially when it challenged beliefs that entire civilizations had held for generations. The ship docked at the capital world's main spaceport, and Lisa was met by a team of tournament officials and media representatives. The attention was overwhelming at first, but she had grown used to public appearances over the past few months. She answered their questions politely, but kept her responses focused on the competition rather than the political implications of her participation. Her first opponent in the championships was announced the next morning. She would face Gormax the Destroyer, a legendary Brutarian warrior who had won the tournament 3 times in the past decade. He stood 9 feet tall, weighed over 400 pounds, and had never lost a fight in his 20-year career. The announcement caused a stir throughout the galactic sports community. Most experts predicted that Gormax would end Lisa's winning streak within the first few minutes of their match. Betting odds were announced at 75-1 against her, the highest in tournament history. Lisa spent the day before the fight studying everything she could find about Brutarian physiology and fighting techniques. She watched recordings of Gormax's previous matches and looked for patterns in his behavior and weaknesses in his strategy. By evening, she had developed a plan that she hoped would give her a chance against the seemingly invincible champion. The night before the fight, Lisa received a video message from Carlos, Her brother had been promoted to major in the Earth Defense Force and was now stationed on a military base near Mars. He looked proud but worried as he spoke to her from his quarters. "I've been watching all your fights," he said with a smile. "You've done things I never imagined when I was teaching you to defend yourself back in New Detroit. But tomorrow is different. This Gormax is the real deal. He's not just big and strong, he's also experienced and smart. Don't let pride make you take unnecessary risks." Lisa smiled back at the recording. "Don't worry about me," she said to the empty room. "You taught me everything I needed to know about fighting smart instead of fighting hard. Tomorrow I'm going to show the galaxy what humans can really do when we put our minds to it." The day of the championship fight arrived with tremendous fanfare. The arena was packed with representatives from hundreds of worlds, and the broadcast was being watched by billions of beings across the galaxy. For many species, this would be their first time seeing a human compete at the highest level of galactic athletics. As Lisa entered the arena, she could feel the weight of expectation and doubt pressing down on her. Half the crowd was cheering for her as an underdog who had already accomplished the impossible. The other half was waiting to see her dreams crushed by a superior opponent who would restore the natural order of things. Gormax entered from the opposite side of the arena, and the crowd's reaction was immediate and intense. He was even more imposing in person than he had appeared in the recordings. His gray skin looked like stone, and his movements had the confident precision of someone who had never experienced defeat. When he saw Lisa waiting for him in the center of the ring, Gormax laughed just like Krex had months ago, but this laugh was different. It was not cruel or mocking, but genuinely amused, as if he found the entire situation entertainingly absurd. "So you are the famous human girl," he said in perfect standard galactic. "I have watched your fights. You are clever. I will give you that. But cleverness only goes so far against real power. I will try to make this quick and painless for you." Lisa nodded respectfully. "Thank you for the consideration," she said. "But I don't plan to make it easy for you." The referee announced the start of the match, and Gormax immediately moved forward with surprising speed for someone so large. But Lisa was ready for him. She had spent months learning to read opponents and anticipate their strategies, and she could see exactly what Gormax planned to do. He was going to try to end the fight quickly with overwhelming force, just like he had done against so many previous opponents. But Lisa had learned something important during her time as a fighter. The bigger and stronger an opponent was, the more they relied on intimidation and quick victories. They were often unprepared for fights that required patience and endurance. Instead of engaging Gormax directly, Lisa began moving around the ring in patterns that forced him to constantly change direction and adjust his position. She was not running away, but she was making him work harder than he expected to even get close to her. After 5 minutes of this tactical movement, Lisa could see that Gormax was beginning to breathe harder and move more slowly. His massive body required enormous amounts of energy to maintain, and the longer the fight lasted, the more that would work in her favor. When Gormax finally grew frustrated enough to charge at her with everything he had, Lisa was ready with the technique that had made her famous. She waited until the last possible moment, then moved aside and struck at the precise point where his momentum and mass would work against him rather than for him. The impact sent Gormax crashing into the arena wall with enough force to crack the reinforced barrier. He got back up, but Lisa could see confusion and respect in his eyes that had not been there before. For the first time in his career, he was facing an opponent who had hurt him. The fight continued for another 20 minutes, with Lisa using every technique she had learned and several new ones she improvised on the spot. She could not match Gormax's strength or endurance, but she could outthink him.